What if I told you that one conversation from ancient Rome could fix your worst business decision in 2026? Not some motivational nonsense, but actual intellectual technology that's been tested for 2,500 years. Today we're starting something completely different. This isn't another philosophy channel where someone reads Marcus Aurelius quotes over stock footage. This is the History of the Mind series, and we're about to turn ancient wisdom into executive-level tools using a system most people have never heard of. Here's what happened. In 1952, a man named Mortimer Adler did something incredible. He mapped the entire Western intellectual tradition into 102 great ideas. Think of it as the ultimate filing cabinet for human thought. Everything from Aristotle to Einstein, sorted and cross-referenced. Today we're taking that system and running Stoic philosophy through it like data through a spreadsheet. The result? Ancient philosophy becomes modern strategy. Let me show you exactly what this looks like. We're starting with courage, but not the Hollywood version. Not the guy jumping off buildings or the politician shouting at clouds. The Stoics knew something about courage that modern psychology is only now catching up to. They understood that real courage isn't the absence of fear. It's high-level accounting for your life. Marcus Aurelius figured this out while running the Roman Empire during a plague. Sound familiar? He realized that courage is simply knowing what you can and cannot control, then acting accordingly. That's it. No drama, no heroics, just clear thinking under pressure. Here's where Adler's system gets brilliant. Instead of reading random quotes, we're going to filter courage through his great ideas framework. This transforms scattered ancient thoughts into a structured toolkit you can actually use. The Stoics divided courage into 3 categories, and this is where it gets practical. First, physical courage. That's obvious. Second, moral courage. That's standing up for what's right, even when it costs you. But third, and this is the game changer, intellectual courage. The willingness to examine your own beliefs and change your mind when the evidence demands it. Most people think they're being courageous when they're actually being stubborn. The Stoics knew the difference. Epictetus taught that courage exists in the space between 2 extremes. On one side, cowardice. On the other, recklessness. True courage sits in the middle, what Aristotle called the golden mean. But here's where modern application kicks in. We're going to use what I call the risk audit. Every fear, every decision point gets sorted into 2 columns. Column 1, things you control. Column 2, things you don't. The courage comes from acting decisively on column 1 while accepting column 2 completely. Let's make this concrete. You're facing a major business decision in 2026. The economy is unstable, your industry is shifting, and you're paralyzed by uncertainty. The Stoic approach isn't to pretend you're not afraid. It's to categorize that fear with surgical precision. What do you control? Your preparation, your response, your team's training, your contingency plans. What don't you control? Market conditions, competitor actions, regulatory changes, global events. Once you see this clearly, the path forward becomes obvious. You prepare thoroughly for what you can influence, then execute without attachment to outcomes you can't control. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote that the mind is like a fortress. Not because it keeps everything out, but because it sorts what enters with ruthless efficiency. Good information gets processed. Bad information gets discarded. Emotional noise gets filtered out entirely. The ancient Stoics developed specific exercises for this. They called them spiritual exercises, but don't let that fool you. These are cognitive tools more sophisticated than most modern therapy techniques. They understood that courage is a skill, not a personality trait. You can build it systematically. Here's one technique that translates perfectly to modern life. It's called negative visualization, but I prefer to think of it as scenario planning. Before making any major decision, you mentally rehearse potential failures. Not to paralyze yourself, but to remove their emotional sting. When you've already processed the worst-case scenario mentally, you can act with clear judgment instead of reactive fear. The Stoics knew that most of our fears are phantoms. We're not afraid of actual events. We're afraid of our imagination of those events. By examining fears directly, most of them evaporate. The ones that remain are usually actionable problems disguised as worries. This connects to another of Adler's great ideas that we'll explore in future videos: the relationship between emotion and reason. The Stoics didn't try to eliminate emotions, they tried to understand them. They saw destructive emotions as errors in judgment, not fundamental human experiences. Think about your last major anxiety attack. What was actually happening versus what your mind was telling you was happening. The Stoics developed techniques to catch these judgment errors in real time and correct them before they became behaviors. This is where the intellectual courage component becomes crucial. It takes real bravery to examine your own thinking patterns and admit when they're flawed. Most people would rather be consistently wrong than occasionally uncertain. The Stoics chose differently. They understood that in a complex world, intellectual humility is a competitive advantage. The executive who can change their mind when presented with new data will outperform the one who doubles down on outdated assumptions every single time. But here's what makes this approach revolutionary in 2026. We're not just talking about personal development. We're talking about systematic thinking for systematic problems. The same framework that helps you manage personal fear scales up to organizational leadership. When your team faces uncertainty, instead of motivational speeches, you can offer them actual tools. The risk audit becomes a team exercise. Everyone gets clarity on their sphere of influence. Wasted energy on uncontrollable factors gets redirected to actionable solutions. The Stoics called this living according to nature, but they didn't mean camping in the woods. They meant aligning your actions with rational principles instead of emotional reactions. In business terms, they meant making decisions based on data and logic, rather than ego and impulse. This is just the beginning. Over the next 5 videos, we're going to explore how Adler's other great ideas intersect with Stoic thought. We'll cover the nature of good and evil, how habits shape character, the mastery of emotions, and the concept of justice in leadership. Each video builds on the others, creating a comprehensive system for thinking clearly under pressure. By the end of this series, you'll have a toolkit that's been tested by emperors, survived the fall of civilizations, and proven relevant in every crisis for over 2 millennia. The ancient world collapsed, but these ideas survived because they work. Not because they're inspiring, but because they're accurate. They describe how successful people actually think when the stakes are highest. This isn't philosophy as entertainment. This is philosophy as technology. Intellectual tools designed to function under extreme conditions. The same system that guided Marcus Aurelius through plague and war can guide you through whatever 2026 throws at your business, your career, or your life. Next week, we're diving into good and evil, and you're going to discover why the Stoic definition of these terms will completely change how you evaluate opportunities and setbacks. Until then, try the risk audit on one decision you've been avoiding. Sort your fears into controllable and uncontrollable categories. Then act only on what you can actually influence. The ancients are waiting to teach you. The question is whether you're ready to learn.